Well, hello y'all. Jenny Gallagher here for Designs by JuJu. We're going to make some cute little burp rags today. So several of y'all have commented both in JuJu's group and in several other embroidery and applique groups I've seen, and you're wondering how we get fabric on the bottom like this. So I'm going to walk you through the steps that I use to try to get your design centered and placed, and then how to put your fabric on the back. This is not a very long video, so you should be able to watch it in just a few minutes and get the gist. Now, I will tell you that probably the longest part of this process is finding your design, because they're also adorable, and matching it to some sort of fabric. That really is the hardest and most complicated part for me. So I'm using one of the baby word sets, baby word sets, I think that's what it is, nursery set. But I've used the He Will Move Mountains. This is for a baby gift that I'm making. And I've just bought the inexpensive pre-folded cloth diapers. And I start by ironing and pressing significantly. Like, you want to iron and iron and iron and press. Sometimes these come with a lot of wrinkles in them, but iron them all out nice and flat. So the first step after ironing is, of course, to find your placement. So how do you do that? So there's not a specific rule that says you have to do it this way or that. Okay, so we're going to start by ironing and starching the entire diaper area. I use one end to cover, and I usually lay it down and let it sort of naturally fall before I choose which end I'm going to sew on. Usually one end is a little crooked or the stitching isn't as pretty, and so I try to fix it where that is covered up, so that if this end is a little bit wonky, it's the end enclosed in the fabric. Okay, so let me set the camera up where you can see the work, and we'll get going. So here we have our diaper spread out on our work surface. So one of the things that I usually do is look at the edges and the bottom of my diaper. See how this edge is a little bit raveled. This one is as well. There you go. There, now you can see. So you can see these are a little more raveled than the ones on the other end. So that's why I chose to use this as the bottom front, because all of that's going to get covered up. So then I decide how far I want my fabric to come. So that's really up to you. There's not a standard. You can run it halfway up, all the way up. You can put this part wherever you want. I do like the part showing to be 3 to 4 inches. I find it just looks more appealing to the eye. There's not a standard rule, but it definitely helps if there's about 4 inches, somewhere between 3 and 4 inches showing. I just think that's pleasing. So this is about 3 3/4 that's going to show. Okay. So once I figure out about where this is going to go, then I know where to put my stitching. You can put it together first and then put your stitching on, perfectly fine. I just tend to do my stitching before I do the sewing. Once I figure out sort of where I want this to be, then that gives me my space for the design. Now, if you want to find center, which is what I recommend, to be able to find the center of the diaper, I fold in half, right sides together, and then I have my center. I usually take a little pin. You can use an invisible marker, but that gives me a clue as to where the center is. I usually mark top and bottom with my pins, so you'll be able to tell where that goes. Okay, then we open this back up and then we put it on our frame for stitching. When you place the design on your hooped stabilizer, this is the center mark. And then once you have your stabilizer, you mark the stabilizer with centers. I usually use my grid underneath my hoop to find centers. Whoops, my crooked line there. So that I have my stabilizer marked. Once you know where center is, you know where to place your fabric. So this design is actually a little wider than it is tall, so it needs to go on my hoop wider than tall, okay? So it's going to lay just like this. So I know this is my center mark. I'm going to line it up with the center mark on my hoop and do the same thing. It's easiest if you'd leave it folded, but you line up your marks and then place it top to bottom wherever it's aesthetically pleasing to you, wherever you think you want it to go. If you've measured and you want 3 inches of diaper showing, then you want to leave 3 inches of diaper showing. I'm really flexible. There's not a specific rule that says it's got to be anywhere. So I just sort of eyeball it and lay it on the stabilizer and pin in place. And that's how I locate placement of my design. Then I run this over to the machine. It's going to stitch a basting stitch and then my design, and we're done. That's the easy part. Okay. Then we take our design off the hoop. And then we figure out our fabric. So the original step that I do is I lay down, I cut a generic piece of fabric, a couple inches wider than my diaper and a little bit longer than I need. Sort of a draft or roughed in piece of fabric. So I lay this down on my fabric about where I want it to be sewn on. You can use the grid marks to help you get a fairly straight edge using straight edges of your fabric. Or you can use a ruler and mark all the places. But I just lay this piece down and I look at my edges. I give myself plenty of seam allowance on both sides. You can see I've already ironed this for y'all for the ease of the video. But that's how I figure out the size. I take my rotary tool and trim to fit so that I leave about 1/2 to 3/4 inch on all sides for our seams. Okay. Then I take it to the ironing board and I iron over my seam allowance, 1/2, 3/4, 3/8, whatever you're comfortable using for your seam allowance. And I iron my top down and in place. Okay. Now some people at this point do take the fabric and the diaper to the sewing machine and they stitch right across here at the very top. Some people do that. And when I was first learning, I did. But you don't have to. It's totally up to you. Okay. Then I bring this piece only ironed across the top back to the diaper and I fold under. Sometimes I stick a little pin in to make sure my fold stays put. but I fold it under so that it fits the diaper exactly. Take this back to the iron and press, press, press. Press, press, press. Okay? So we have this front seam ironed and possibly sewn in place. Just because of that right there, when you touch it, it starts wiggling. You could baste it or even pin it in place. So that it stays put. Okay, and then we fold under the back side and take this back to the ironing board to iron all these creases in place. Okay, once all of these are ironed and in place, you can take a look and see if it looks like you want it to look. Put a couple of pins in place. And then take a look at what is going to be your finished burp rag. And see if it's what you like. And if it's not, feel free to shift it around as needed to make sure it looks nice. And I think this looks fine. Another method of doing this, or ironing it out, is to take your fabric piece, once you've measured your sides and ironed them in place, you can take this piece, the fabric piece, and fold it under on the front and the back. This is especially helpful if you're worried that you're not going to catch the front and the back seam in the same row of stitching. You can take and iron it down, sort of like bias tape, so that the front row of stitching is just a smidge below your back row of stitches. Or back row, or back fold row. Okay, so if that happens, you know that once you get it in place, it's going to stay put. But you want to iron this all in place. I use magic sizing for my starch. You can use whatever kind of starch you want, but definitely starch all of this in place for the best finished product. So all your lines and stitches are nice and straight. And so once you have this lined up, when you're running this through the sewing machine, you're not going to miss the back fabric. It's going to catch every time because it's slightly taller. Okay? And so that's how we make the burp cloths, with the fabric bottoms and a design on top. Told y'all it wasn't going to take very long. Nice and easy. Okay? Well, we'll mention a couple of tips. A lot of times these diaper pieces aren't centered. So when you're laying this down on your stabilizer, on your hoop, if you're not careful, this design will be stitched over here on this row of stitches or this row of stitches. Before you start your design, if you stitch a basting stitch around, you'll be able to see exactly where it's going to center. If you stitch that row of basting stitches and you're like, oh, that's too far over this way, you can either remove the basting stitches and start completely over, or on your touch screen, you can move your design over or up or down just a little bit to get it centered better. This isn't one of those times when you want it pleasing to the eye. It doesn't necessarily have to be perfectly centered from here to here. But if you get it centered inside here, it's usually better pleasing to your eye. The recipient, the gift recipient, whoever you're giving this to is probably not going to notice or care. It's usually our little quirks that it drives us nuts. But if you want to center your design between here, sometimes the center method doesn't always work. I'll show you this one. I think I had to move over just a little bit. So if we mark this as center and you fold this over, well, it's pretty close. But you'll see that side is just a little bit wider than this side. And so technically, to get it centered on the whole piece of fabric, it's a little bit different inside this little padded part in the center. And that's okay. You have to decide for yourself, do you want it centered on the whole fabric or inside this little panel? And either is fine. Whatever looks most pleasing to you is fine. Okay? If you have any questions, please feel free to comment. This is Jenny Gallagher for Designs by JuJu. So here we have the burp rags all finished and coordinated with the little lovey and the rag quilt that goes with it. So I just wanted to share with y'all the JuJu fonts. The stone is done in the Sherlock font from JuJu's site. The Wild is Backyard from Designs by JuJu. The One is a kind of a sketch font. You can see up close. It's not solid, but it makes a really cute addition to this particular kind of burp rag. The One is called Arwen Sketch. And then the He Will Move Mountains is from Baby Blessings 3. There's several really nice, really cute designs in the Baby Blessings. Like, I bought about 5 sets, I think, just to get particular designs out of them because they're so amazing. But I thought y'all might want to know what the fonts were and the stuff I was making for this video. So there you go. Baby Blessings 3, Backyard, Arwen Sketch, and Sherlock. Okay? Y'all have a great day.